Well, basically we're seeing a complete convergence of what is called real life, like some people call it the meat space, the actual life, and the virtual and the online stuff, right? That's completely converging. So within a few years we'll basically think it's a fact that I can superimpose your data over you and look at your profiles if you want me to. Just like now we're trading business cards, we'll be trading links, Whether that's always good or not, I don't know. But, I think it becomes more transparent, and that makes it probably easier for a lot of things. But it also has significant issues, like tracking, privacy, invasion, all these things. But in the end, you have to probably say that the benefits of having all this is outweighs the negative. How do they connect? Well, basically, ecosystem is what we had until now. That means not just in media, but pretty much everywhere. It basically means that in a system of capitalism, which of course, the web is not socialist, it's the opposite actually. But in any case, in that sort of extreme system, everybody essentially does in business what makes money. So it's basically about the wellness of my company, my industry, my job, my whatever, right? And so in media, for example, that meant you had very large companies, Sony and ITV and big television stations, right, that were essentially based on their own qualities, and they were largely walled in. Right? They were monopolies to large, especially in music. Right? What's happening now is that people are realizing that if we don't collaborate, for example, with the telecoms and the advertisers and the governments even, in other disciplines, we don't generate enough money. So I cannot basically run the system by myself. Take a company like Disney, right? They essentially are an empire, and you're either inside or you're outside. So that was possible until now. It becomes an ecosystem, so it's all about them. But if you want an ecosystem, then you have to connect to others. Like a typical great Dutch company was Fab Channel, which you may know, right? Unfortunately died. It was too early. But you build a system of people that work with you and you generate money together. Right? And that is essentially what we're going to see pretty much across the board in the future. Well, it's completely fragmented, basically. Right? So you don't get a job, you don't keep a job just because you're there. You always add value to what you do, and that probably means you'll be moving around more often. And it means more insecurity, probably more chaos, but also more opportunity. So I think people will be working in specialties that they do here and then go over here and then there and switch back and forth and always learn new things. So it will probably mean less large companies and more medium companies, small companies to provide services. For example, I think most artists will hire agencies and management companies rather than sign up with a big distributor. So these small companies will do things like online marketing and digital promotion and creating products and help them, but it may only be a year or two until they move on to the next. Right? So that's probably going to be a trend. Yeah, actually I think the way that things are shifting is moving towards a sort of more Eastern viewpoint. Essentially the fact that it's going to be very hard to determine what I own. Because it's mostly collaborative, right? So the fact that I make a living or that I have a career is probably going to be based on many people supporting it, and I support many others, right? Which is pretty much what it's like in Africa already. It has always been. So it's not so much about individualism or so, right? In the sense of my own career and nobody else, like essentially a star-driven model. In Western music or culture, like film or theater, we had essentially star-driven models, right? So it's either you're a superstar in music or you don't matter at all. There's very little in between. And that's going to change. So we have a lot more middle class artists, musicians, producers, right? And they tend to be more connected to others. So I think in general that's more a tendency towards the Eastern viewpoint of doing things rather than being isolated. Right? However, of course, China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, they have very large populations with very proactive growth, right? So they're going to surpass us. in terms of the consumption and the habits that they have. You know, if 250 million Indonesian people are going online with a mobile phone, they're going to create a lot more business than we do here in Holland or in Switzerland. I mean, that's just a fact. But I think we can learn a lot from them in terms of how they look at what happens and who owns what and who makes money. I think the Western system of really sort of very much walled in copyright and sort of big companies, that's crumbling because the internet sort of subverts it. Right? So our opportunity is to connect the two. And that's quite obvious. But the very strict sort of Hollywood model of content is coming to a close, right? Because distribution is a given. Was it about 500 things? But I think it's important to realize that, you know, the internet has been there since 1994 or 93. Now 2009 we have finally reached a point to where it becomes meaningful and useful, right? Because before that it was mostly for experts, right? And now with the telephone and touch screen, people can just go and do things, and my mother can order stuff on eBay, you know. Then it's going to go like this, right? So essentially what we're seeing on the internet is that it's, as far as media is concerned, it's not a gradual growth like this, it's more like comes to a pivot point and goes like this, right? So we're shortly before that takeoff point. And that means for creators and for people that work with creators and that work in media is to sort of anticipate what is needed, right, is not always easy. So it's a good thing to stay on top of the trends and take a look at all these things and also look at a global view. Because what we used to have in media was a very much a local view, right? And that will continue, of course. But the real big momentums are on a global scale.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Now why do you want to go and put stars in their eyes? Why do you want to go and